The Camel Quiz. How large can an elephant grow? Elephants, biggest of all land mammals, often 12 feet in height and weigh as much as 8 tons.
The question for the underconsumptionist is, where does the money come from to buy back all the surplus value in commodities? There appears to be a demand gap. On top of this, we must remember that capitalists endeavor to raise the amount of surplus they extract from workers while lowering wages. This means that there is a systematic tendency for S, surplus, to rise relative to V, wages. The demand gap increases. There are many ways that the capitalist class tries to raise the consumptive powers of the working class to fill in this demand gap. Consumer credit allows consumers to buy commodities ahead of their wages, but an economy cannot be sustained by debt, as we're learning now with the credit crunch. In the 50s and 60s, a strong labor movement was able to demand higher wages from the capitalist class. This led to the creation of a middle class with a higher standard of living. But higher wages can't fill the demand gap completely unless they eliminate S, or profit, altogether. And we know that there could be no capitalism without profit. The state can step in to create demand. This is the basic Keynesian tactic. By providing welfare to those who consume less, the state can raise aggregate demand. The state also spends a lot of money buying shit from capitalists itself. Big things like roads and railways and stadiums. Some of these things, like guns and bombs, are considered unproductive expenditures because the state immediately destroys what it has just bought. But state spending and welfare still can't be enough to fill the demand gap because ultimately state budgets come out of the circuit of capital in the first place. Taxes are deductions from wages and profits, V and S, and thus do not represent any ultimate new source of demand. Of course, workers aren't the only people that consume. The capitalist class, though quite small, has large powers of consumption. Luxury goods like mansions, cars, vacation homes, yachts, chandeliers, diamonds. Capitalist money comes from surplus in the first place. So can capitalists themselves buy back enough luxury goods to fulfill the demand gap? Well, if capitalists spent all of S on consumption, there would be no surplus left for reinvestment or for growth, which leads us to the most important way of mopping up excess demand. Reinvestment. Capitalists take their profits and they reinvest them in machines and labor in order to expand production. So expanded production means an increased demand for machines and more money toward wages, which in turn increases demand for consumer goods. This is the primary way in which capitalism fills the demand gap, through effective reinvestment strategies. But as you may have noticed, this leads to a circular logic. How can we say that the demand for S comes from the profit of selling S? How can we say that profits from the selling of surplus are used to purchase the surplus? This apparent absurdity is solved by introducing the element of time into the equation. At the end of a production period, the capitalist has products equal to C plus V plus S, which he must sell. But the end of one production period is also the beginning of the next period. So at the same time that capitalists send their products off to market to sell, they're also making decisions about reinvestment to begin production anew. If the capitalist class as a whole expands their productive investments, this will create enough current demand to fill in the demand gap. All of the surplus product is then realized, and the mystery of effective demand is resolved.
More people smoke camels than ever before. Oh, crossword puzzle fans, your attention please.
This means that the only way to resolve the problems of underconsumption is through perpetual capitalist accumulation. Capitalism must grow and grow if it is to survive. This means finding more and more labor to extract surplus value from, hence the geographical expansion of capitalism through its various phases of globalization. It is popular to look for external barriers to this expansive capitalist accumulation as a cause of crisis. Clearly, capital can face external barriers. The environmental crisis may or may not be such an external barrier to capitalist growth. But the reality is that capitalism faces internal contradictions as well. Capitalism is not a harmonious system which bumps up against external forces that create disequilibrium. Capitalism is inherently internally contradictory and crisis-prone. What an examination of the underconsumption problem shows us is that if capital is to experience equilibrium growth, it will require very specific investment strategies. If capitalists invest in the right proportions, then perhaps capital could avoid crisis. A theory of crisis, then, must be a theory of the nature of capitalist reinvestment and how these reinvestment strategies shape the rate of accumulation. The theory of the falling rate of profit and of overaccumulation, which will be discussed in detail in future videos, is precisely such a theory. It's a theory of accumulation which argues that the incentives that drive individual capitalist investment strategies create disequilibrium and threaten the rate of profit, thus causing crisis.
If you want a cigarette that doesn't taste so hot or dry, then light a new long cool and get the cool taste.
So exciting, so restricting, so refreshing, it's the only
So exciting, so restricting, so refreshing, it's the only cigarette that has the taste of extra coolness. So
extra cool.
long tight, cool tight, want to taste the coolness that only cool can give you. Yes, that only cool can give you. Yes, that only cool can give you.
Cool Filter Longs join Cool Filter Kings, the only cigarettes with a taste of extra coolness.
Gee, I almost got a bullseye. Let's see if he's that. What's this? Oh, I never could beat Anne. Then we were on opposite sides in a toothpaste test. My side used Crest. Anne's side used the same toothpaste but without Floristan. And that's when I beat Anne, because my side had 21% fewer cavities with Crest.
In similar tests, Crest reduced cavities 34% and 42%. You know, more dentists recommend Crest than all other toothpastes combined. So have regular checkups, watch treats, and brush after eating with Crest. Accepted by the Council on Dental Therapeutics of the American Dental Association, as signified by this statement and this seal.
Nice shooting, Anne.
Remember, the only toothpaste with over 12 years of tests that prove it reduces cavities is Crest.
똘똘이 오줌 쌌니? 똘똘이 침대가 다 젖었네. 오줌 싸는 똘똘이. 똘똘아 기저귀 갈자. 엉덩이가 뽀송뽀송. 어머, 기저귀 갈았더니 오줌 싸는 똘똘이가 코자네. 오줌 싸는 똘똘이.